Will the real Defender please stand up? The Land Rover here in Salt Lake, and then Warner Ineos Grenadier over in West Valley, providing us with both of these vehicles. I'll include a link to both their websites in the description down below. Let's get right into the comparison. The Defender has a ton of different powertrain options available. I think this inline 6 is the most comparable to the Grenadier's inline 6. This produces 395 horsepower, 406 pound-feet of torque, goes through an 8-speed automatic, and fuel economy, you can expect to get higher teens on average. Now currently the Grenadier in the US only has one powertrain option available, a turbo inline 6 made by BMW. It's the B58, goes through an 8-speed automatic. Now it's massively detuned, 282 horsepower, 331 pound-feet of torque. But reliability, it's kind of the focus with this. I almost forgot, fuel economy, you can expect to get mid-teens on average. Both are solid. If you're looking for more straight-to-the-point comparisons like this, make sure you subscribe. Now, the Grenadier is truly focused for off-road use. I mean, first off, it's body and frame, and just look at the elements on this vehicle. We've got recovery points, skid plate protection. You've got this huge steel bumper, off-road lights in the center. I mean, this one has a raised air intake from the factory. You can put checker plates there on either side. Again, off-roading is the key with this one. But guess what? The Defender also has a huge focus on off-roading, and I think this is something that a lot of people get wrong. First off, we do have recovery point there at the bottom, skid plate protection with this as well. And this does have modern car stuff, so you've got these fancy fog lights. You can see here, we've got these fancy daytime running lights, which the Grenadier also has fancy daytime running lights. And these checker plates are more for like looks and everything rather than for functionality. But as we go through more elements on both these vehicles, I think a lot of you will realize the Defender is a lot more heavy duty and off-road capable than most people realize. So let's not talk about suspension. The Grenadier has solid axles front and rear, and it's coil sprung front and rear. It's a very basic setup. The shocks, they're not active or anything like that. Again, basic. The Defender has independent suspension all around, and air suspension is an option. You pretty much see it on every single Defender. The air suspension not only acts as a unit to raise and lower the car, it's also the shock absorber. So very high-tech stuff, but Land Rover's air suspension is also heavy duty. Now the Grenadier has 17-inch wheels, and you've got all-terrain tires. You can fit bigger tires on these. They kind of do the smaller tires because they're more readily available all around the world. Now with the Land Rover, this one's got pretty big wheels, 20s on this one, with some all-terrain tires. The smallest wheel you can fit on an inline 6 is a 19-inch wheel, unless you do a caliper conversion, then you can fit an 18. And that is one thing with the Defender from an off-road standpoint that is a little bit of a downside, is because the brakes are big, the wheels have to be big. Here's the side profile with the Grenadier. Of course, very boxy with the overall look, and this is heavy-duty construction. There's a lot of steel. This is a heavy vehicle. Weighs well over 6,000 pounds because everything's been reinforced for off-road use. Now the Defender also has cool boxy styling, and this is one of the few vehicles that has heavy-duty unibody construction. It's a very rare thing, but this thing weighs over 6,000 pounds, and that's not for no reason. It's because it's heavily reinforced. Now opening the cargo area of the Grenadier is kind of cool with the double door design. But yeah, great space. Again, if you actually look at this, it's very similar to the G-Wagon in terms of the interior dimensions and the whole setup. I've talked about this in the past. But this is all very easy to clean. Same thing on the back there. So yeah, practical cargo area. Again, this vehicle is basically the same size as a Jeep Wrangler, but it feels a whole lot more practical and similar to a G-Wagon. The Defender's kind of in a similar boat. Now the Defender is a wide vehicle, so that is something that kind of benefits it, is the extra width. But you notice here, again, easy to clean design. Same thing down below as well. And then you have this to raise and lower the suspension, which is pretty cool. But yeah, this is actually a pretty short vehicle. I think it's actually a little bit shorter than the Grenadier. They're very similar in terms of overall size, but it's still practical. And that, yeah, feels cool. Now the Grenadier puts its whittle wadder on the back, gotta say it that way, of course. You got a full-size spare there as well. And you guys can see again with the steel bumper on the back, recovery points and all that. The Grenadier can tow about 7,700 pounds. The Defender puts its whittle wadder on the side, so a little bit different. But spare tire on the back with it. And this is impressive that it actually has a spare tire here in the back. You even though it's unibody construction. Now, the Defender can tow over 8,000 pounds, about 8,200 pounds, so slightly more than the Grenadier. Again, you have to at least get an inline 6 or more to tow that. And I love how I purposely picked out specs with black roofs on both these, because it really does show you the similarities between these two vehicles, but then also the differences. Now, in the back seat of the Defender, great legroom, got a little storage pocket. We've got our own climate zone, USB ports, and the seats, they're easy to clean, but they're also really cool looking, very comfortable as well. This one has a fancy headliner. I love little windows up top. We also have a panoramic sunroof. Now, in the Grenadier, even though these vehicles are similar sizes, the Grenadier is going to be a little bit more cramped in the back. Again, body and frame construction pushes everything up and tightens everything too. We've got vents in the back, some USB ports. These seats are very easy to clean. Not quite as comfortable as the Defender seats, but they're more than comfortable enough. And then you've got plenty of headroom. Now, the back passengers don't get a lot in terms of windows, other than the side windows and the back windows, which are more than big enough. But the front passengers, yeah, they get those, the Safari windows. Blind spot monitoring with the Defender. I love the trim throughout, but then also the rugged elements like the exposed rivets and everything. Memory seats. Now, a lot of people have mentioned this to me, so I'm going to mention this in the video. This says 825 pounds of payload, but then when you actually look up the payload capacity of the Defender, it's like almost 2,000 pounds. I don't know why the door jamb sticker doesn't match up with the spec sheets and everything on the Defenders. If you know, let us know. Anyways, the front seats, really nice. Gotta have your power adjustments. Getting in's easy. Again, the air suspension, raising and lowering means easy to hop in the vehicle. Now, this is going to be, again, just like how this is a modern constructed vehicle, big digital gauge cluster. The steering wheel is very rugged with the overall look, but then it has a lot of modern features like heated steering wheel. You've got a heads-up display. Love this trim that goes across the dash. I think that's really cool. And then you can see 360 camera system with this as well. And you'll notice that the Defender is definitely a lot more tech heavy. And that's kind of where some of the money has gone in the Defender. Got Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. I like this little control stack down here. So the climate controls also double down for the drive modes. You just press this in to do the drive mode select. You can adjust the air suspension. This does have a 2-speed transfer case. Again, this and like the Grand Cherokee are probably one of the few unibody vehicles that have ever had a low range. And then you can see the shifter for the 8-speed. And then we've got tons of storage here. Phone charging pad, cool box, center console, and this even folds all the way back. Really nice trim on the top. Got that grab handle Defender logo. Camera, rear view mirror. Again, you'll notice lots of tech. Very fancy trim with the headliner. Now, something to note, this Defender is an X, which is more expensive for an inline 6. So this one stickers for about $108,000, as you can see. But if we did an inline 6 X Dynamic SE, which is pretty common, ooh, G63 with gold. That is fancy. Back to Defender pricing, that would be probably around 100 with similar options, like mid-90s to 100, roughly. Just depends on the exact options that you add to it. See, the Defender doesn't have to be this expensive is the point I'm trying to make. The X is just everything in the Defender. No blind spot monitoring, that's too techy. You can see here with the trim, again, not quite as fancy feeling as what you have in the Defender. Again, this is all about utility. Payload on this, 1488, really solid. Everything's manual, and that's what you notice. This only has tech stuff if it's completely necessary, and gotta yeah, we have to put the key in the ignition, so you're gonna have to be doing that. No digital gauge cluster, just a warning light cluster in the center. So completely unobstructed view over the hood because you don't have big fancy screens or anything like that. And then look at the steering wheel, like very basic controls. You've got your horn, volume, cruise control. So again, it has some techie stuff, but nothing too crazy. And then we just have a backup camera. And because we don't have a center gauge cluster, your speedometer and everything is here on the one side of the screen, and then the other side of the screen is your infotainment system. And this unit is good. It's a little bit slower to load up compared to what you have with the Land Rover. But we got this inclinometer and compass down below, which is really cool. Bunch of physical buttons, and this is one of the coolest parts of the Grenadier. It's a very tactile vehicle, and it has a low range. It also has a center diff lock. So with the Land Rover, the diff locks are all automatic, right? It's all a computer system with their drive modes and their fancy four-wheel drive system, whereas this, you select everything. It's very manual. You can see with the center console, no cool box, right? So again, everything's more basic. Nice trim here, and kind of mention the windows. Got a bunch of auxiliary switches up top. The cockpit style is really cool. Diff locks for the front and for the rear. There's also an off-road mode. Again, that just basically changes the ESC and then does stuff like No seatbelt warning, for example. But yeah, with the diff locks, they're not automatic. Like, you have to turn them on. You have to be like, yep, I want the rear differential locked. Now, the Grenadier, like the Defender, has a bunch of different options you can add or not add depending on what you're looking for. This one starts out at 74, but total MSRP in this one is about 90,440 as equipped. When I look at inventories at Ineos dealers and then at Land Rover dealers, what I see is most Defenders and most Grenadiers are about 80 to 90 grand. There's some that are more, some that are less, but that's kind of the typical range. Let's drive them. We're gonna set off in the fancy pants. I forget about the button. Defender, and then we'll drive the Grenadier second. It's so interesting because I've watched videos on the Grenadier and the Defender, and it's interesting to see how much hate the new Defender gets because it's not body on frame and it's not solid axles and all of that. But if you actually look at the construction of this vehicle and look at the off-road capability, because again, that traction control system, everything, it is top notch. The Defender is incredibly capable off-road, and then with that you get a vehicle that is fantastic on-road. Very comfortable air suspension. Why is this guy? Anyways, very comfortable air suspension, and the unibody construction means it handles well even though it's a heavy vehicle. And the space in this, like, I cannot emphasize enough how big the Defender is compared to other vehicles that are in this like luxury off-road segment. I own an LX 700H Overtrail that I'm doing that long-term powertrain test on, and this is bigger inside than the LX in terms of like the space that I feel. I got more headroom. I feel like I've got more width and everything. And this is a shorter vehicle. The LX is like 200 inches in length. This thing's, again, if you take out the spare tire included, it's like 197, but you take away the spare tire, and the spare tire adds like 10 inches in terms of length. So this is very similar in size to like a Jeep Wrangler, but it is wide. It is definitely wider, but it just feels massive inside. Very, very comfortable. But yeah, the width is one thing that is, you know, I think a slight downside for some people with the off-road stuff, but it's not like it's crazy wide. You know, the Octa's insanely wide, but like this, you know, you're still under 80 inches in terms of your width. And so it's narrow enough that I don't think it's really that much of a problem. I think that people kind of blow that out of proportion. Now, the inline six is very smooth, good power, good fuel range. It's just a good powertrain. I really enjoy it. And if you get the raised air intake, it makes cool, stop. It makes cool sounds. I get so much anxiety filming in downtown Salt Lake because people just, it's like they don't know what a walk sign is. Oh. Anyways, this thing is very luxurious, and it's still capable, and it's still heavy duty construction. If you don't believe me, go and look at the construction of this. Again, I understand that unibody is never going to be quite as good as body and frame long term, but the Defender is really good. It doesn't, again, it weighs over 6,000 pounds because they've reinforced everything in this. And it's the same thing with the Range Rover Sport in the full size, by the way. So it's not like, I think a lot of people that like, the Defender's gone soft. I think that they think that Land Rover literally just threw a Defender badge on a car, and it's not the case, right? When you look at things objectively, they made a heavy-duty unibody vehicle, which is really cool. This is unique. There is nothing else other than other Range Rovers that are like this. Like the Jeep Grand Cherokee tries to do the same thing, but it's just not heavy-duty. It can, you know, the Trailhawk can off-road, but I took a off-road package Grand Cherokee off-road, and the Defender blows it out of the water when it comes to ground clearance and angles and just the traction system. It's so much better than Jeeps. So anyways, this is a seriously impressive machine, but let's go see if the Grenadier feels, because I think people buying these cars, they want something that feels special, right? That's kind of, if you're going to spend close to $100,000, I always forget about the button on the front. If you're gonna spend like $100,000 almost, like this one's over $100,000. Yeah, if you're gonna spend around $100,000 on a vehicle, gotta feel special. So, Grenadier. Now, a lot of people are saying that this is, you know, because I mean, everyone knows, I'm not gonna go through the story because I think everyone that's watching this video has heard the story like 5,000 times. But this vehicle to me feels less of a, because I've driven the old Defender, This doesn't really feel like a successor to the old Defender, in my opinion. And the reason I say that is it again, very similar construction, right? Body and frame construction, solid axles, back to the basics. So like that, in a sense, makes it a successor. But when I actually look at this vehicle and look at what it offers compared to the old Defender, I think that this offers more than what the old Defender offered. Because the old Defender was so utilitarian, so focused on just being as basic as possible, that it wasn't a do-everything type vehicle. You know, it could do the off-roading, it could do the towing, but like daily driving, you could make it work, but it's like you're having to make it work, you know what I mean? It's not desirable, I would say, when it comes to driving experience. This is very desirable when it comes to the driving experience. It is a modern vehicle in terms of how it drives. People always complain about the steering. The Defender has some of the best steering for a boxy vehicle. Going from that to this immediately doesn't bug me at all. You get used to the steering. You get used to it. Anyone who says that you can't get used to it, hogwash. They don't know what they're talking about. They drove one of these around 2 corners and then just gave up. I drove one of these with the old steering system. This is the 2026 Plus with a better steering system. I drove one of these for a year. I got used to it after a week of ownership. And every single time I get into one of these, it's like, because again, it's a recirculating ball rack. This was a super common steering system. Like the old G-Wagon had it, for example. The old Land Cruiser had it, the 100 series. This is a super common steering system. And so, just like, oh, I haven't ridden a bike in a while, you hop on, it feels kind of awkward, and then boom, you get used to it. I like it. The steering system's amazing off-road. You don't get any kickback, and it's engaging on-road. It's not tiresome either. Like, if this steering rack tires you out, you need to hire a personal trainer. You need to start getting some exercise. Like, that's just bad. So, all of that aside, which one, like, if you're gonna spend, you know, $80, $90, $100,000, which one? I do really think that it's gonna depend on utility. What are you using the vehicle for? Are you gonna go off-roading at all? If you're never gonna go off-roading, I don't think that immediately disqualifies the Grenadier, because this is still a really cool on-road vehicle. But I do think that, like, obviously the Defender is more refined on-road, okay? But something to note, if you, well, once you get used to this, like, I don't know, it feels fine on road. Just not as refined. It's a little bit louder inside, but again, it's more like, if you're a car enthusiast, this thing's great. When it comes to off-roading, here's the truth. People will say Grenadier all day because the more basic setup and the solid axles and everything, and that does give it a huge benefit, but there are certain areas where the Defender is objectively better. Steep inclines and water. So with the steep inclines, I've just noticed that with the Defender, it seems like their fancy traction control system compared to having the lockers that this has, it just seems like it does a little bit better overall. Now that's not bad. Like, this is an insanely capable vehicle, but the Defender seems to just edge out a little bit with those super steep inclines. And that's kind of a notice. If you're just a steep incline and it's not very articulated, an advanced traction control system pretty much always performs better than just straight up lockers. Once there's articulation, lockers do better. Now, inclines aside, water. Lockers, when you have lots of water and, you know, snow, mud, that's where the lockers seem to kind of fall behind an advanced traction control system, because an advanced traction control system can really, like, perfectly distribute the power, and it just, like, you get in mud in one of these, snow, it works it out. Whereas, again, the Grenadier can do great in those conditions. It takes a lot more driver skill with this Grenadier. It takes a lot more driver skill with those conditions. So it is something to consider. So in terms of which one's better, they're just different tools. Do you want a more basic off-roader that, again, both of them are, like, these are my two favorite, I'll just say this right now, these are my two favorite SUVs in this category. I love the looks of both of them. I love how both of them drive. I love the off-road capability. I love the style. But you really just have to pick, sorry, I gotta look at my GPS for a second. You really just have to pick which one you kind of like the best, and, you know, just drive both of them. But I guess what I'll close this video off with, because I'm sure you guys always want to hear, oh, which one you'd pick? Both. If, oh, gotta let this person. If money was not an option, if I could just buy whatever, like, just could spend as much money as I wanted, both. 100%. I would just buy both. Because the Defender, you know, daily drive it most of the time and take it on, like I said, snow and mud and all that kind of stuff. And then the Grenadier for like the summer off-roading where it's dry and it's mostly rock crawling. I know that's a weird take, but I really love both of them. And if I was like uber rich and could just buy whatever cars I'd want, I would have a Grenadier and a Defender.